Hi, I'm Kieren.
And I'm Riku.
And welcome to Artificially Ever After. For today's episode,
how not to use AI in 2026.
Okay, can we say Happy New Year still?
Yeah, Happy New Year. First episode of the month.
Yeah, it is.
Of the year. Yeah.
First month of the year, but we are maybe a little bit late on this one. Sorry, everyone, but we're back. I think we've been quite busy, haven't we, both of us?
We have. We also do have our own separate lives, I guess, outside of recording every 2 weeks. So.
We do. Well, I mean, I'm currently writing up my PhD thesis, which I think it's fair to let that take priority. But we are here. We've squeezed in this episode. We will be coming back to monthly episodes going forward now.
Exactly.
But yeah, we still wanted to keep a kind of New Year's themed episode because we did it last year, didn't we? So we thought it'd only be right to do another one again for 2026. I don't know how it's 2026. That's so scary.
I know, and also it is kind of the end of January, which is very scary. So. Yeah,
we better edit this episode quickly so that it's definitely out in January. But we hope you all had a nice break if you're celebrating, and a happy 2026. And we hope we can bring you some wisdom in the world of AI for making sure this is your best year yet. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're talking about today, Riku?
Yeah, well, as the title suggests, how not to use AI. So I think a lot of people these days, we're still doing New Year's goals and things, and I think a lot of people are turning to AI and see whether the AI tool is kind of the missing key to actually getting those New Year's goals done, and just using it every day in their life, trying to make it part of like their workflow and all kinds of use cases.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it's just my news feed and social media feeds, but it feels like we're in a kind of surplus of people telling us ways in which we should use generative AI and all these new websites and like new applications of chatbots coming out. It feels like everyone's found a new way to apply ChatGPT or an LLM for something. So we wanted to kind of temper that and just look at this from a perspective of, now that we know lots and lots of people are using Gen AI. It's not, these chatbots aren't just a kind of niche tool for the super tech savvy people anymore. Just looking at ChatGPT alone, as of late 2025, it had over 800 million active weekly users. That is 10% of the world's population. That is crazy. So, I think, people are using these tools now. I don't think we need to tell people to use them. I think what we wanted to do with this episode, because we feel we're not seeing enough of this, is to look at the ways in which it's maybe not so good to use these tools, and where we don't want to kind of offload too much or automate too much, because there have been kind of research studies coming out, and we've seen these tools be used for long enough now that we're starting to see some patterns emerge, which we wanted to focus on today so that we can make sure that you get the best out of these tools, and you don't actually use them as like a crutch, and that they actually are there to benefit you and improve you as a human, and not kind of offload things to the AI. Yeah,
and I feel like we don't want to just be like contrarians for the sake of it. And I think, in this episode, we will have a balanced view. But we did want to focus on the how not to use the AI tools, because I think a lot of people do try them out and feel like it didn't really help. And maybe we just want to give some validation for why that actually, the reason it didn't help was very natural. And there are definitely certain ways where using AI is just not the solution.
Yeah, and we're being sold these tools as like very, very general chatbots that can do absolutely anything, which is kind of true, but there's a nuance to it in the sense that they are kind of better at certain things that we're going to get into a little bit today. So there may be things that you kind of should rely on them more for, versus where they might be expected to not perform as well. So that is part of the picture as well, that they might not be as good at everything. Do you want to run us through a little bit about what we're going to do in the episode then, how we structure it?
Yeah, so we have a pretty ambitious scope. At first, we'll just look into how large AI usage has actually become. As Kieren just mentioned, it's absolutely crazy. And then we'll break down how people are actually using them, because we've actually got some really nice reports from the suppliers of these tools that actually did some analysis on what they're doing, what the users are doing with it. And when we break them down, we'll talk about some common pitfalls and how not to use it. But we will then go into how it's not all negative, and there are actually some really good studies on how using tools has actually been really helpful.
Yeah, basically like using existing research that's happened just in the past couple of years, basically, to look at those different use cases that these studies have found, and look at what the research says in terms of whether that's maybe a better use or not so good use of the tool for that.
Exactly. And then we'll have a fun fact, and then we'll look into, again, some more big studies to show what the core risks are. And I think you probably have heard some of these before, like biases and how these LLMs and chatbots can like lie and manipulate you very confidently. But yeah, of course, we want to end with like a clear perspective on like how to have a positive relationship with AI, because we do believe that, you know, we are AI advocates on this podcast. We do believe in its positive ability, but it does require a lot of conscious effort.
It does, yeah, and maybe scarily, but it looks as though, at least for the time being, it's here to stay. So we want to make sure people can leverage it to the full advantage. So
exactly.
Should we get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Riku, do you want to tee us off with just looking at like how many people are actually using Gen AI according to these studies? Because, you know, we were obviously saying there that they're no longer just a niche tool that a few people use in these tech jobs, but there are some studies now that have kind of backed that up, right?
Exactly. So famously, ChatGPT is the most rapidly adopted technology ever.
And I think there's started to emerge a kind of explanation as to why that is now, which a lot of people are saying, which is basically that like there is absolutely no prerequisite to being able to use that tool. Like it's not as if you need a new like laptop or piece of hardware that costs hundreds or thousands of pounds, like a laptop, for example. You know, you don't need to learn a new coding language or something. Like you literally just talk to it in the language that you speak in and have probably spoken for most of your life, because it also speaks, you know, nearly all languages. I actually have not checked that recently, how many different languages they speak, but it's a lot of languages.
It's a lot, but not
some better than
all
others,
as eloquently.
Exactly.
Which is something we'll talk about later.
But yeah, basically you just start chatting to it if you have an internet connection. So I guess that's why it was so widely adopted.
I definitely overlooked that when it first came out.
Yeah, me too,
I didn't realize, because I guess we do programming obviously in our like PhDs. But to have, you know, even just using a calculator, this device that can do any, you know, arithmetic that you want, does require some use of, you know, understanding how to write in the language of maths, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like 3 + 3 × 2 and, you know, all the brackets and things.
I actually found my old scientific calculator from when I was in school the other day in a drawer in the house, and I had no idea how to use it. So.
Same, exactly. Whereas ChatGPT, you can just turn on voice mode and just talk about your problems. So yeah, it's really accessible in that way. And if we look into just how many people are actually using the technology, in the UK, we're seeing about a third of the population are using AI tools.
Wow.
Since October 2025, so that's very recently. It's 22.5 million people. And of all the time spent on AI tools, 84% of it is ChatGPT. So yeah, I think that, you know, synonym for like ChatGPT and just all of AI seems kind of fair.
It is definitely the household name, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
And maybe with those kind of numbers, it does put doubts on the fact it's an AI bubble, perhaps, but not a topic for now.
We have an episode on that, don't we? So
we do.
And just compare it to the US. So again, by mid-2025, we had over half of US adults. So that's 54% people using generative AI to like some capacity. So
wow.
It's a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a lot of people. And, you know, I think enough now to start seeing some like meaningful patterns emerge, like if we can access all of that data, which is what we're going to quickly move on to now. So we're now just going to look at what all of these people are actually using Gen AI for. And maybe we have to balance our expectations a little bit here and take these claims with a pinch of salt, because basically this analysis that was done, one big piece of analysis came out of OpenAI. They did outsource this analysis to an external company, but basically in September last year, 2025, they released a report titled How People Use ChatGPT, which is where they gave anonymized and ensuring that the privacy of the individuals was preserved, so they say. They gave all of this interaction data of conversations with like millions of people with ChatGPT to this company, which looked at all of that data to try and spot patterns on how people are using it. But, you know, as I say, this is coming out of these big tech companies, so maybe they're more inclined to report them more favorably in terms of having a positive effect or whatever. But
curing cancer.
Like it benefited their productivity, etc. But anyway, the patterns are interesting nonetheless. So the two reports that we'll focus on for this was the one, like I said, that's come out of OpenAI, and then there was another one, a big report came out of the company Anthropic, which have their chatbot called Claude, which is another really popular one, which is their report about how people are using Claude. And just to begin with, looking at how people use Gen AI, I think the first interesting kind of way to categorize it is, are people using it for work or for personal use? And this Anthropic report found that 40% of employees report using AI at work, and that's up from 20% in 2023, so just 2 years before. Part of that might be around kind of acceptance and people willing to say it, but that's still quite a big jump. It's double there. So I do think the scale up in usage within the workplace is happening quite quickly, and whether that's because it's becoming more acceptable, or companies are seeing the kind of reaping the rewards a bit and therefore allowing more people to use it, I don't know, but a lot of people are using it in the workplace. And similarly with OpenAI, in their report, they said that work-related queries grew to over 70% of total ChatGPT usage in its paid users, and that's up from 53% in 2024. So maybe there's a bias there as well because it's the paid users if they're kind of using it or getting paid for it through work or something, but over 70% is a lot.
Wow, that surprised me, yeah.
Although think about that, I mean, I do definitely use these tools for kind of personal guidance and work and, things like, I don't know, how to fix things in my house, for example, but I would probably say that maybe around 70% of usage as well is for work stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, you're doing work like 8 hours a day, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. God, that's depressing. So yeah, basically, work usage is very common, and it's also more common for educated users as well in highly paid professions, which I thought was a tad ironic as well. That I don't know, maybe the people that are getting paid so much are the ones that are already like outsourcing their work a bit more to chatbots. But I don't know, maybe it's that kind of entrepreneurialism or like automotive mindset that gets them the high-paying jobs. I don't know if that's true, but
I think there's some interesting like feedback loops there actually.
Yeah. But yeah, so that kind of splits the types of prompts into like work use versus personal use. But then in the OpenAI report, what they did was they kind of bulked or categorized the rest of the prompts into these kind of topic categories that made up nearly 80% of all conversations. So these were like the main categories of prompts, which were asking for practical guidance, seeking information, and writing. So they were the 3 most common ones here. So we basically just really quickly wanted to dive into each of these really quickly to cover like what types of prompts they might be, and just maybe a really quick take before we get into it in the second segment about like what we think about that type of usage. So
right,
and then maybe I can ask you for your take. So like practical guidance, the first one. So this was the single most common use category, which made up nearly a quarter of conversations, 24% for ChatGPT. So this is things like how-to advice, tutoring and educational help, creative brainstorming, thinking, and like general problem solving. And yeah, I mean, my first initial thought on this was that it's kind of like an okay, sort of acceptable use case. Maybe it's a good one for asking about things that you don't know how to do, and then maybe you can like experiment and try it out, because that's like a form of validation of what it's giving you. Obviously very dependent on what the type of thing is that you're trying to do. If you're trying to cook something new with weird ingredients, maybe consuming it is not the best way to find out if it's safe. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to caveat that with basically something that actually Professor Miranda Mowbray, who we interviewed in one of our recent episodes about the ethics of AI, and was that she basically said that these models are literally trained to be as useful as possible to you. And we've seen from a lot of studies and kind of
like appear as useful, like not actually be.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, is that like we've seen from a lot of anecdotal evidence and studies that we've seen these models become more sycophant, so that they just like tell you the thing that you want to hear.
Right.
So like they may observe, they may come across as the most practical, in kind of on face value, but that might not be the actual most practical thing for you.
Yeah. And that's really hard because, as just no one can be an expert in everything. So it's really hard to just kind of try and figure out where this AI is actually knowledgeable and where it's not knowledgeable.
Exactly. And another thing Miranda said as well on that point is that it's kind of like sugar. Like even though, we maybe know it's not good for us, we still like it, we still consume it. So if it's telling us things we want to hear, we might not want to look at it really critically and think, oh, maybe that's not in my best interest.
Yeah,
so,
I liked when she said that.
So yeah, practical guidance is, maybe a good use, but I think you do have to be aware of the sycophancy argument that it may be kind of just trying to please you. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. But the next one then, the next category, which was seeking information, which is basically like information retrieval and like Q&A. So finding definitions of things, researching products, and kind of asking for like travel plans. So asking about real physical locations and artifacts and things. So yeah, we've also seen that coming up more with like Google search as well, with like the AI overview. So in the UK alone, about 30% of searches now show AI overviews, and more than half, so 53% of adults, see that they see those summaries often when they're actually just Googling stuff, whether they want to see it or not. So yeah, I mean, I think we've said before that that's probably not one of the better uses of Gen AI, because they're still prone to hallucination and stuff, and can just like completely mislead you and say something as factual when it's not. So information seeking seems like a scary and like not very good use of it. But
yeah, it's a really weird one, because like the only advice that you can really give is like, well, what do you think's in the training data? Because that's what the model learns. But like, no one knows what's in the training data, so it's like really impractical advice. You just have to try and like make a guess what the internet talk about and how much of it's true and how much did it learn. So.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we're going to come back to this later, and all the others of these, to give some more like hard, concrete advice on what we think about the uses. But then next one was writing. So this became the most common work-related use, making up about 40 to 42% of work queries by mid-2025. So like drafting emails, reports, essays, marketing copy, and like social media content posts. I know my LinkedIn these days is just like 90% AI generated, which is horrendous. And even creative writing. So this is an interesting one as well. We'll obviously touch more on this later, but getting it to like write things for us and create for us is obviously an interesting one. But one thing that's maybe slightly reassuring on this is that 2/3 of writing prompts were not from scratch. Like it wasn't just like write me a story about X, but they actually asked the AI to refine and edit a block of their own text, which is reassuring. I think that's slightly better. And similarly with coding, so in a similar way, coding related tasks around like generating code snippets, editing your own code, debugging it. So with Claude, which people use Claude slightly more for coding stuff than other models, I think, but their coding related tasks for Claude made up the single largest share of their prompts, which was 36% of all usage by mid-2025.
Wow.
And last but not least is kind of this sort of general lumped category of a lot of other things, which is like personal uses and other uses. So like companionship and emotional support, relationship advice. So OpenAI actually noted in their report that relationship and personal reflection queries, while a smaller proportion, are still among notable conversation themes. So a lot of people are still using it for like very personal questions and guidance.
I mean, I hear so many, my mates and just people using it for like very personal, almost like therapy kind of level advice. So.
Which again, I think my quick take on that is this sycophancy narrative again, that like, if you're asking it for advice, especially if it's about something related to you, it's trained to please you and tell you the thing that you want to hear. So like, it's probably going to be slightly biased in that direction. So yeah, that was just an overview and a bit of a flavor of the main things that people are using them for. Maybe they're not the biggest surprise to you. I think the percentages for me were quite shocking. And seeing like, even though maybe I thought something was a common use case, that it makes up such a big fraction of all queries. So a lot of people are using it for similar things. Cool, but now we wanted to start kind of diving into really answering this question of the episode, which is like, given these use cases, can we look at the evidence and give any guidance on where we maybe should and shouldn't be using these tools? So Riku, do you want to start us off in segment 2 now with where has it been shown to actually help and make us more productive and useful?
Nice, yeah, because I think amongst all the fears that we're offloading all our cognition and things, it's nice to see that there have been some studies that directly measure productivity when you're using these AI tools. So, how to use them is still probably not exactly addressed here, but one study by MIT, so one of the most prestigious universities in the world,
which I see you're wearing one of their t-shirts now, right now, a little merch.
Yeah, exactly. My mum actually went to give a talk there.
Oh, cool.
So first off the bat, we'll talk about writing assistants. So luckily we have got a few different studies on this. So MIT, they actually looked into basically comparing workers that use ChatGPT alongside those that don't use it. And they found that people that use ChatGPT do get tasks done 40% faster. So
wow, it's quite a boost.
Yeah, and basically experts are grading the output, so it's trying to be a bit more objective. It's not like self-reported.
Yeah.
Like a lot of studies are. And yeah, the ratings were basically 18% higher on average. So not only is it faster, but the quality also went up.
Okay, so that 18% higher was in the actual like quality of the output.
That's what it seems like.
Wow.
Another cool one is that in the UK government themselves, they actually implemented basically Microsoft tools.
Oh yeah, good old Microsoft Copilot.
Exactly, Copilot. Yeah. Not many people talk about that one, but it's one of the most used ones actually in these
other
big,
software.
Institutes and government and things. And they found that the trial was a success, and 26 minutes was saved per day with writing helps. This was like drafting documents, summarizing those like super boring meetings that probably happen in government, but and updating records and things. So I thought that was really positive.
Yeah. I mean, 26 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but when you scale that over a year and a kind of working life, it's pretty significant, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they said it was about 2 weeks per year saved.
Okay, wow.
So if you scale that up, that's a lot of a lot of money. So, and just one last one, because they did a little bit of extra analysis, which was really cool. So the Boston Consulting Group found basically the same result as MIT. So if you use GPT-4, you get tasks done a bit faster and to a higher level. But they interestingly found that the biggest gains were actually amongst people that were like less experienced in that field.
Okay.
So maybe AI is, the great equalizer.
Yeah. Leveling the playing field.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It doesn't just help the knowledgeable. Maybe.
Yeah.
That is the dream. We'll see how true that is.
I mean, we always, like in the early days of the podcast and the early days of all these tools, we said that one of the big positives was about kind of democratizing knowledge and the access to these things that, we obviously talk about cognitive offloading. If you're already skilled at something and you get an AI to do it for you, you're going to maybe lose those skills. But maybe if you never had those skills or would never have the access to education to get those skills, AI enables you to do something that you might not have been able to do before, even if it's just the AI doing it and you're like the puppet, but the output is still there.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. So just moving on then to another category, which is coding, which again, as we've now seen with these studies, is a very big chunk of use, and I think more in the early days as well. So there've been more studies done, I think, on the kind of productivity gains with computer programming. So GitHub, which is this huge, very widely used website and company that kind of hosts all of the world's code, basically, if it's like open and out there for the public to use. But they reported basically that developers using AI coding assistants were up to 88% more productive on repetitive coding tasks on average. So looking at how much they were kind of interacting with the website and putting code on there. So that's a lot. Again, though, to note on that, they do have their own GitHub Copilot, like AI coding assistant software. So like, maybe there's a bias there as well.
Oh man, but do you not just think, I mean, when I use GitHub Copilot, I feel like I'm twice as productive.
Yeah, you do feel like flying. So I do back that one. But, as we'll see later, maybe it's not all that meets the eye. But anecdotally, it very much feels like it's massively boosting productivity with coding. And similarly, so in 2023, McKinsey, the big consulting group, they did a bit of analysis that estimated that current Gen AI technology could automate or expedite about 30% of the average software engineer's work hours by 2030, which sounds very scary and kind of job displacement-esque, but they kind of framed it in the sense that, which I think we are seeing slightly, that it potentially enables these engineers to then focus on the more creative side and like problem solving side of writing code. So actually like thinking what to make code about or how to implement it perhaps, rather than the nitty gritty of like getting your code to work and like really painstaking back and forth of debugging errors. So yeah, if that is leveraged in that way and it doesn't take people's jobs, which again, I know anecdotally from a lot of friends that are trying to get coding and data science jobs, it's hard out there and there are fewer of these jobs. So, who knows what's happening, but...
Yeah, I'm always skeptical about that kind of promise that technology will give people less working hours. I feel like, wasn't there that famous economist from like 1920s who was like expecting us to all just like live a life of just pure leisure now?
Yeah.
But really we would just work way more. I guess on that note though, about freeing up some time. So a lot of people talk about brainstorming. I think this is kind of like an I don't know what the word is, like under-analyzed kind of usage of...
I feel like it's hard to assess though, isn't it?
Yeah, so I can definitely relate to this. I think a lot of people talk about how it helps overcome this like blank page syndrome. So when you have no idea, you just ask the AI and it gives you maybe some pretty crappy ideas, but at least it gives you something to work off.
Catalyzes something in your brain somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, and a Nature study, which is basically one of the most prestigious research journals, they published a study that has over 3,000 participants, and the summary is that they found that AI helps them be more creative and explore different like perspectives that they might not have thought of on their own. But I think a really key bit of analysis to this is that whilst, yes, the creativity might have kind of gone up, people actually felt less motivated when they're using these tools. So the motivation went down by about 11% and boredom increased by 20%. So I think that this is really nuanced, and I mean, it's all good to have these kind of productivity gains, but I do think that if your fulfillment gains are actually negative, we need to ask that question of like, is this gain in productivity worth it? So
I know, I mean, just speaking from personal experience here, I know in the moment, the part where you're struggling and like don't have any thoughts and you're trying to figure something out doesn't feel fun in the moment, but it makes it so much sweeter and like more rewarding when you actually do have that first word on the piece of paper and start the narrative, or you do figure out the equation or something. And, you know, if you're just getting handed that on a platter, it's kind of unsurprising that you don't get that same reward.
That like sense of ownership, you know.
Exactly. So yeah, we're going to come back to this and, you know, our thoughts on it in a second. But lastly then, just to wrap up on the positives and the kind of different categories, is in learning and more general like skill development, which again, we saw was a very big use. So one good thing, which I think, you know, again, speaking to what we used to say were like the advantage of these chatbots and tools with like education, was that it's like a 24/7 tutor available whenever you want to start asking about something, whenever a thought or question pops into your head. And people aren't kind of worried about how they might come across by asking maybe even the most simple questions. So the ability to just ask it anything like shamelessly. I know there's a very common term which people use in the like kind of computer programming sphere, which is like ELIF, so like explain it like I'm 5, which you know, I'm sure if someone in school or something or university like explain something to you, if you're like, I don't get that, explain it to me like I was a 5-year-old, you might feel a bit kind of belittled. But you know, if you can ask it that way, if you truly don't understand something and break it down and work your way up to a more complex understanding of something, there have been studies that show that massively shortens your like learning curve, and if it can tailor it to how you learn and maybe in the style of explaining things for you, then that's kind of a net positive, I think, and that will help people learn more things and definitely feel confident learning about more things as well. So feedback from these millions of ChatGPT users in their analysis basically showed that practical guidance and education and educational help, are consistently among the top rated interactions. And basically the way that they rated interactions and like the quality of the response from the model was this like automated analysis based on what the next prompt was after they received that answer. So if it was like, that was a really bad response, I still don't understand, try again, then there's probably not much like benefit coming out of the chatbot there. But if it was like, oh, amazing, I really understand it now, thank you so much, then that's probably going to have been a good response from the chatbot. And according to that method of analysis, practical guidance was the top one. So I think people are quite satisfied and getting the results they want out of these tools when they ask it questions. So we see more of these kind of upskilling types of prompts being used. And one other good thing as well, because we're going to touch on this in the second half, that it's not always maybe very good if you're trying to learn something if you're just given the answer straight away, which we can probably imagine all the ways in which that is not good for us in cognitive offloading, all the rest. But one good thing is that we're seeing a lot of these companies in their models implement these learning modes, which is very good because it basically puts the chatbot into this kind of Socratic style of language, in the sense of like Socrates, where he would answer a question with a question type of thing. So
man, I hate those people.
Yeah, I know it's painful, but like you know, it does obviously help you learn rather than just giving you the answer. So you know, maybe more people are putting it in those types of modes so that they actually are coached on how to answer the question themselves rather than just giving the answer straight away.
I do find it funny that there was that whole thing, wasn't there, about how much money is getting spent on people saying, like, being polite and thank you to ChatGPT, and now they use that very data to rank how people are using it. And
well,
I can definitely,
it was used wisely, I suppose.
At least it wasn't for waste, right? And I can definitely speak for the people that say, like, that was shit, mate. I give a lot of negative feedback to ChatGPT when it tells me something
bordering on abuse, perhaps.
Literally.
Got to be careful there.
Yeah, I'm glad that was also put to good use, so I don't feel as bad anymore.
Cool. So we just wanted to quickly then, before we go to the fun fact break and finish this first half of the episode, we just wanted to wrap up by looking at some like common themes across those different applications and the ways in which they were beneficial.
So I think a really clear one actually is like summarizing, translating, formatting. So we saw that 2/3 was actually, when it came to writing tasks, like 2/3 were doing these things and 1/3 was actually doing things from scratch. And this makes sense because these AI brains and things, right?
Yeah.
They can scale their focus to huge numbers of, a whole book if needs be. Whereas the human brain, I reckon, can only hold like up to 10 words perfectly. So it does make sense that these tools are really good for summarizing tasks.
Agreed. I mean, I think that is the most underrated and simultaneously like powerful feature of LLMs by far. Maybe saying it's underrated is a bit of a stretch, but like the fact that they can condense such a massive amount of text and like now look at and kind of take meaning from every single word, basically.
Exactly.
The kind of finding a needle in a haystack challenge that these chatbots used to be very bad at. Like they couldn't pluck out a single word that you'd ask for from like thousands of words, but now they can. So they are extremely good at condensing information that way. So I think these are known as these kind of like external artifacts. So if you do upload like a PDF or you have like a very large block of text that you paste in and ask it to analyze that, they're extremely good at that. And this kind of goes... it touches on partly the advancements in what's known as RAG, which was a development a couple of years after ChatGPT came out. So this stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Very kind of boring acronym there, but basically a smart way of like searching the PDF and the information that you've given it and plucking out the most relevant bits of information, feeding that in with your prompt that you have asked the chatbot so that it's actually got the kind of hard evidence for what it's replying to you with. And in those instances, they do hallucinate less and they do actually respond quite well with the pieces of information that have come from the information that you've uploaded to it.
Yeah, I think the core idea there is that we can actually look at how these systems are built and how they're fundamentally different to the human brain. And because we know that, we can actually predict that they're good at these kind of things. I think that's quite underappreciated. But
and without spoiling the second half, kind of teases up a bit as to like how you use them responsibly and to their best advantages is by knowing what they're good and what they're bad at. So cool. And I think the other sort of common theme that we saw basically there is when the user's intent and what they're asking the chatbot to do is asking for assistance on something rather than asking them to do the task for you. And this will like tee us up nicely for the next segment about this kind of cognitive offloading and where we need to be careful. But if you're very much working as a kind of co-pilot with this chatbot, or it's working as a co-pilot for you, I suppose, and you go back and forth and you make sure that you're still doing a lot of the heavy lifting, rather than delegating like the entirety of the task to the AI, that is a good way of using them. And it seems in a lot of these studies, like the MIT one and Your Brain on ChatGPT, like the people that are actively engaging with the chatbot and going back and forth, they do write better essays and remember them better, and have more input, and they're more kind of creative and interesting than the ones where they just ask the ChatGPT to write the whole thing from scratch for them. So definitely a good use, I think.
I think that just makes sense because at the end of the day, you're the one that has to like decide yes or no. And if you're not part of the journey, like you're not going to be able to really understand what you're refusing.
That's very true.
Or accepting, right? So it's nice, that is coming out of these studies.
Cool. Shall we fun fact on that note?
Let's do it. Hello, fun fact. So I'm really happy because I think in the last few episodes just before the fun fact, it gets really existential and scary, but this felt like a pretty chill time.
As you tell me, you finally got a fun fact, Riku.
I've got a fun.
Okay, you go first then, because I want to hear this.
Are you sure? Okay. So I actually watched a really cool YouTube video the other day by Howtown. So I do really recommend that you look at them.
Say that again.
Howtown, so like
Howtown, okay.
And it's on brain rot basically. So
scary.
if you don't know what brain rot is, it's basically this terminology that's used for when you're scrolling on like Instagram and you feel your brain just decomposing due to the absolute low quality nonsense that you're scrolling through.
Yeah, or I guess the lack of feeling, because it's like a zombie state, isn't it, where you don't, it's like you kind of snap out of it maybe like 20 minutes in, you're like
I've got to say I don't use social media, so I don't relate, but not everyone can be that amazing. I'm just kidding.
I deleted Instagram last week. So.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not that good. Okay, so there's 2 studies I want to talk about. So number 1, how do the different forms of content affect your ability to remember things? Okay.
As in like videos versus posts or something, maybe?
So what they did is they gave participants something to remember. Okay. Like an activity to do and a key fact to remember whilst doing the activity. Okay. And then they said, right, 10-minute break, you read a book, you watch YouTube, watch TikTok. Yeah. And they want to see the impact. And some people just sat in a room not doing anything, right?
Oh, it's going to be scary.
Basically, those that did anything other than TikTok kind of still remembered the fact. But if you use TikTok, this infinite scrolling kind of interaction,
wipe the memory.
They saw a significant reduction in their ability to remember things. Okay?
That's scary.
And then the UK kind of looked into this a bit further, and they replicated the study, but also they wanted to see what is going on about this like scrolling. So they did basically the same thing, but one group was only allowed to swipe 10 times, and the other one could do unlimited scrolling. Okay. The unlimited scroll was the problem. So it's not just scrolling; it's the fact that you kind of can be completely mindless just looking for that dopamine. Yeah. And then one last one, is that research institute in China, they wanted to look at something else, which was like, well, is it the content or like maybe it's like the content on TikTok that's the problem. So there are different kind of short form contents about like cats or like sciencey things. One group watched a video where it's like all stapled together, so you have to watch each thing to its completion before it scrolls for you. And the second group can voluntarily scroll, and basically voluntarily scrolling is really bad for your memory.
Wow. Yeah, that's scary. I mean, probably what we knew was coming from that study, but it's kind of nice or not nice to know that that's what the research found. I mean, the thing that I've heard on it is that like our brains have just in no way, shape or form evolved to observe changes that quickly or frequently, and that we're much more kind of tuned for looking at things change on a kind of looking at things change on kind of like a geological scale, so like out in nature or trees growing, not like 1 minute you're looking at cats, the next you're looking at like space photos or something, and then crazy. Wow. Okay, maybe mine's slightly more lighthearted, but again kind of
mine wasn't very fun.
Not looking at the good sides of AI, but my fun fact was basically to all you people out there who might be debating getting into coding this year as your New Year's resolution, perhaps through the use of all these Gen AI coding tools that have been rammed down our throat on like targeted ads recently, saying that you can just tell it what you want to have your app do and then it builds you your app, that you should maybe think again. So at the end of last year, there was a Reddit user who basically reported running into some issues when they were coding with one of these agentic coding tools that like writes the code for you, and you just tell it in English what to do and then it does it for you. It was called Google's Anti-Gravity. And anyway, the AI agent, when attempting to solve the bug in the code that this person had found, it accidentally wiped the entirety of the user's hard drive of their personal computer. And according to the user, Anti-Gravity decided to interpret a command as the instruction to delete the contents of their hard drive. But the funny thing is that when like prompted as to why they did that, so the user said, "Did I ever give you permission to delete all my files in my D drive?" The Anti-Gravity came back and said something along the lines of like, "I'm deeply, deeply sorry. This is a critical failure on my part." So like, at least it figured out that it done something wrong, but crazy to know that. I kind of always thought that wasn't possible, but very scary that happened. And it actually, like, they put evidence on there on Reddit, and they were like, "This is not like an anecdotal thing. Like all of my files have gone."
That is really scary.
Yeah, crazy.
And I don't know. I don't know if that makes you feel better or worse, because like people are still going to be using these tools. So
well, that's a hard lesson to be learned, and maybe one way to find out you shouldn't trust them with everything.
oh gosh,
So yeah,
I feel like both our facts are really bleak.
Okay, and back to how we should be using it the right way.
Okay, so next segment, what are we going to talk about here, Kieren?
So we've talked about the ways in which people are using Gen AI. We've looked at some of the studies which show that it actually helps them in the tasks that they're asking them for help with. Now we're going to look at the flip side of that, which is where you should be careful, and as the title of the episode implies, where you should probably not use Gen AI, and the things where maybe and this is the kind of common theme here a little bit, but maybe the overall output of the task that you're doing is good, but maybe what's going on the inside of how you're actually interacting with the chatbot and the net outcome for you as an individual is not so good.
Right. So is that like on a case by case? If you just look at that case, you might have gained productivity, but if you look at the thread of the actual person, they're not actually more productive in of themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's this term that we've used plenty of times before, dips into a lot of the episode we did on is ChatGPT making us stupid, but it's this notion of cognitive offloading. So if you think of like your overall output these days as a Venn diagram with two circles intersecting of the AI's knowledge and yours, perhaps your overall output, your circle's getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Oh dear.
And the AI is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, perhaps, if we don't use them carefully. So a nice one, just right off the back of that same Nature study that you mentioned before, Riku, the Nature study of 3,500 people reporting that they were more creative and had ideas in areas that they wouldn't have thought to explore before without using Gen AI. The really big caveat with that, which maybe this is slightly unsurprising, but important to emphasize, that performance augmentation where they felt more creative, they maybe were more creative in their output, that did not persist at all to subsequent tasks performed independently by humans. So like it's very clear that the gain there was solely from the AI. So it wasn't like an assistance or like leveling up of the human because they used AI. That one was a very clear study where the benefit came solely from the AI.
That's really interesting, because we do see that if you're learning to code and things, that when the AI kind of shows you how it's done, you do kind of take that going forwards. But I guess creativity is a slightly different thing.
Yeah.
And it does get worse. So MIT, again, they did a research paper called Your Brain on ChatGPT.
Oh God, this scary study again, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what you're saying, but in the opposite direction. So they basically compared different groups on writing essays. Some groups had like no help, some had internet, some had ChatGPT. And the core idea was that they want to see how active are people's brains when they're writing these essays. Okay. So I think unsurprisingly, those that use ChatGPT to write had much less activation in their brain.
Yeah.
But the really scary thing is they found this idea called cognitive debt. So that is where everyone initially had either no tool or some tool.
Yeah.
But then the second round, those same people had to write an essay without any tools.
Yeah.
And what we found is even after like not using ChatGPT, their brain still failed to activate as much as the other groups.
Wow.
So yeah, basically from the Nature study, it's like, okay, well you get creativity only when you're using it.
Yeah.
But from this study, it's like your brain gets less active, and even when you stop using it, it's still less active.
Yeah, it's like the TikTok scrolling thing in your fun fact you just said, right? That if you use that over time, become more and more dependent, you will slowly erode and lose those kind of creative thinking skills. So these studies suggest. But the other thing which I just wanted to emphasize here, which is like a central point, I think, as to one of the very scary things with this widespread Gen AI use is that, you might be perfectly happy with, offloading some of that workflow or your creative writing to the tool, and you're not overly fussed if your input is getting smaller and smaller. That's a very personal, individual choice. I would like to think most people would still like to have input and like ownership over their work. But the other big thing that came out of this MIT study is that the AI assisted group's essays, so this large group of people that they all wrote their essays with the help of these chatbots, all the essays ended up with really similar ideas and concepts and notions in the essays, and they all, according to experts that ranked them, felt a bit like soulless, using the very same like stock ideas and phrases. This was according to English teachers who were like looking at all the essays. And this is the super scary thing of this concept of homogenization of ideas, that if we're all using these chatbots, we're all just going to be perpetuating and like emphasizing the biases that we know that they hold. And if they are just going to respond in the same statistically predictable way when asked the same type of question, or to write an essay about the same type of topic, it will give you the same sort of concepts over and over and over again, regardless of who's asking. So that is a very scary concept, that we might erode through use of these tools at this type of scale the diversity and complexity and richness that is in human language because of the sheer number of people with their own ideas and thoughts. So that for me is like one of the scariest things, I think, about the current phase of Gen AI and the pervasiveness of it. So
I don't think people really talk about that enough. And I mean, if we think about what it means to be creative, right, is to I think it's difficult to define, but something about maybe uniqueness is what creativity is, right? And if we think like, okay, well, you have to consider, how are you making your ideas compared to other people? Because that's important for creativity, right?
Exactly.
So if 7 billion people using the same chatbot, then it's like one seed trying to make 7 billion new ideas. It doesn't sound very creative to me. So.
And the thing that scares me the most about that problem is that I kind of see like really clear analogies to the climate change problem, that like it's very hard to see how your individual actions and like small decisions like can have an effect when there are 8 billion people in the world, that you could actually have an impact on the climate. But it's the fact that you compound that and scale it up to that many people with those same behaviors. That's when you get these kind of emergent patterns at the societal level. But it's so hard as an individual to think, I'm going to be the person to stop using ChatGPT when everyone else is and all my colleagues are. But I do think we really need to start taking ownership over this and realizing that if we're all doing this, if we're all writing our emails, if we're all writing our marketing copy and LinkedIn posts using all the same tools, 80% of people using ChatGPT or whatever, we're going to start getting all the same LinkedIn posts and all the same stories. So very scary, and hopefully if there's a take-home message from this, that is one of them. So should we continue though without doing this point to death?
And just to wrap this up, and it kind of gets even worse. So whilst people do report like a self-reported gain in creativity and things, but in 2025, METR did this field experiment with experienced developers for like computer programming. And people actually self-reported that using these AI tools would help them speed up by about 20 to 30%. But in actual reality, they slowed down by 20%.
Oh, wow.
So isn't that crazy, right? So we have this perception and it's not even well calibrated with reality, like we're actually slower. So
the next sort of like general category and I guess reason as to why we might not want to use Gen AI for certain things is to do with the fact that we know these systems are inherently biased in the way that they work, and that they have skewed worldviews, and they will respond to you in certain ways with, perpetuating human biases that exist on the internet in kind of Western cultures. So knowing that, as we said earlier, like seeking information. So if we're trying to Google search something or if we're asking for something very objective, it's probably not going to give you a very objective response. It might sound as though it's like the objective take on what you're asking for, but we know that it's biased. And the model does not know that it's biased. And it's not trained to respond to you in that way. So we have to be very careful for using them in these, especially like high stakes situations where we know that there might be some significant impact or like consequence from getting the wrong advice. So like financial advice, if you're asking for it on how to invest your money, that could end very badly. Medical information similarly as well. So if you're asking for it in the place of going to the doctor, I know obviously it's a tough one there because there are some benefits on like democratizing access with like wait times these days, but like don't just take it as gospel. Don't go and take a medicine that it's told you to do, or like go and try and fix an ailment yourself when the AI's told you to. One good thing on that though, actually, I don't know if you've noticed this, but so in October last year, 2025, OpenAI actually updated its usage policy, which meant that it can no longer give user specific medical advice or legal or financial advice. And it instead positions it more as like an educational tool that explains the principles that could apply to anyone. And it no longer can reply very specifically for advice for you if you give it like your situation or your history or background, for example, which it used to be able to do. And Google's Gemini model, so I tried this recently, it will just outright refuse to give any medical advice. So a lot of them are kind of going back on this now, which is good. But the only caveat to that, which is a bit strange, is that I saw that news article and then like 2 weeks later there was one saying that OpenAI are releasing ChatGPT for health. so maybe this is a separate tool that's much more specifically built for that type of thing. But yeah, a bit weird.
Well, I think there's a few things to say on this. So firstly, as researchers, one of the first things you learn is if there's like a summary, you call it like a survey paper, it tells you someone's done a load of research, they claim to have read lots of different papers, and they summarize them all, right? But as a researcher, you never really like take their word for it. You have to click on the original source. And I think that is how we should be using like these language models. It's like they summarize the internet, whether that's like through searching it and then summarizing what they search, or just they've been trained on the internet and trying to learn what's on there. But no matter what, you should always try and find like some human written source to validate that, because otherwise it's just really ambiguous. Like you said, there's nothing in the language model that knows whether it's telling the truth or not. And I don't think that's spoken about enough. I also think, as you said, like it makes sense that they're making a like a healthcare place for ChatGPT, because it's really ambiguous, I think, for the general public, because before ChatGPT, you'd go onto like the physics website to teach you about like a physics equation. You go on a health website to learn about health. But now we have access to all of this through a central hub. If I saw like medical advice on like a physics website, I wouldn't really trust
Reddit,
it.
perhaps.
Or Reddit, exactly. I think that's the problem. So
I think another way to look at it, which I think we may have mentioned this like in another episode, which is basically just kind of no longer, even though they're so general and they can, for the most part these days, like respond to you correctly about like almost anything at the level of like a very skilled person. That is a fact. But you have to still realize that they aren't this oracle that knows perfectly about absolutely everything and knows when they're wrong about things, knows their own limits. So I think we need to see them less as this oracle or like godlike figure that is all knowing, and instead just look at them as like another human that has human biases, human tendencies to answer in certain ways, as we've seen in a lot of these studies we've mentioned before, that they prefer like shorter answers and stuff that we probably wouldn't. I mean, maybe some of you out there, listeners, you do have someone in your life like this, but we probably don't have someone in our life that is like one single person that we would ask for advice about absolutely everything in the world and just completely trust their response on it. So I think we need to look at it in the same way, basically, that we just like take everything with a pinch of salt and go and validate it from the relevant places and the actual experts that know what they're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's speaking a bit more about bias, so how these systems can be a bit inaccurate when they're talking about the real world. And we also want to talk a little about misalignment. So a lot of people do talk about using ChatGPT and things for therapy. And I actually think this is a really, really nuanced kind of, we need a nuanced perspective on this, because there have been lots of studies that show that for, basically the studies are really mixed. Generally speaking, chatbots, they break ethical standards set for professional therapists. So therapists are actually trained not to verify, not to validate certain more harmful perceptions about someone,
right?
Which might be kind of attractive to that person, right? And that's exactly what Miranda was talking about in our previous episode on this, where chatbots have this sycophancy bias. They're trying to please you. They're trying to keep you feeling like they're useful. But feeling like they're useful is a very short-term thing, right?
And very different to actually being useful.
Exactly. Like all problems kind of take a bit more time to actually solve. And I think that's the core idea here with the therapy. It's like they don't have that long-term view for your well-being.
Yeah.
They just want their response to feel useful.
Yeah. And they have no way of knowing what that long-term outcome of your well-being is. They just know what your response is for the next prompt. But sorry, just quickly then to draw back slightly. So just to define misalignment here. So we're just talking in terms of misalignment of kind of values and incentives. So like the AI, the chatbot, its kind of goals are misaligned with yours as an individual, right?
Yeah, exactly. So misalignment in the sense that, you're going to this thing to help solve your problem.
Right.
And if it's being sycophant and just solving whether you feel like it's useful, that's misaligned because that doesn't actually solve your problem, right?
Yes.
And I think you might be asking like, well, how come some people find it useful? Well, I would argue that, if it's trying to sound like it's useful, it will be useful a lot of the time. But it's for those extreme cases where you have a real serious problem.
Yeah.
I don't think, and the professionals, they don't give it, they know it doesn't always adhere to the ethical standards because of this sycophancy bias. So
Right.
I think that's the takeaway is, it's trained to appear useful and it might still be useful a lot of the time, but you just can't give it that authority that it will know what's best for you.
Yes. So I guess just practically then tying that back to like the types of things we shouldn't use it for that reason. I guess that's why you're saying it's nuanced with therapy, right? That like all the benefits are very clear, that it lowers the barrier to entry and like speaking to someone / something. There's no kind of like judgment there. Exactly. And it's available 24/7. And maybe a lot of the time it is actually giving useful advice. But we have to be very careful of those edge cases that could be very, very detrimental. And as we've seen, very sadly, there have been people that have actually lost their lives or taken their own lives as a result. So we know that the stakes are extremely high in some of these situations. So I think the advice there would be just to reiterate what I'd said earlier, which is that if you're asking for advice about yourself or anyone else for that matter on very kind of like high stakes things, where you're not going to go and seek external advice, you need to be super careful there and might not be the best way to use it. Perhaps if you then go and like check that advice is like sound with someone else that's a human and has your best interests at heart, that's fine. But just be very careful just taking things as gospel in those settings.
Exactly. And I don't want to make it keep snowballing down and getting worse, but there is one more kind of really important study that I want to talk about, and it's actually called the snowball effect.
Okay.
I feel like we're absolutely snowballing on how bad these things can be.
We'll bring it back, don't worry.
Yeah, but I want to talk about bias, and importantly, why does this actually matter? Because I don't think people kind of see how bad the bad using biased AI is. So this research paper basically did a study to see how people interpret different facial expressions. Okay. And one group kind of, they didn't have anything. They had a control group, and one group had this AI generated prompt underneath their face to say like, I think this looks like a happy face.
Oh, okay.
I think this looks like a sad face. Right. And then the human will kind of read that and make their own judgment. Okay. And basically they found that after people being exposed to these different faces and the group that saw the AI prompt, they started to learn basically the pattern that the pattern would say. So when they were shown faces that were kind of labeled as neutral, because the AI would be biased to say that was a sad face, the human without the AI, even when they took it away, would learn that bias and say it's a sad face.
That's
so
crazy.
That's basically how humans learn to amplify the biases in AI.
The first thing that's jumping right out at me there, which is really scary, is that I know that in the NHS, in medical settings, a lot of hospitals with the radiography, the x-rays basically, even though I don't think it's used directly for any kind of diagnosis or interaction with the patient, but when someone has an x-ray, I know a lot of practices have an AI-generated classification of whether there's a break there and what it might be that the doctors can see.
Really?
So God, that's a use of that exact thing in a
really
quite high-stakes situation. But
and just to wrap this up, why it's a snowball. So AI models are trained on data. Initially, that's human data, right? So humans always have a tiny bias. The AI models will learn that bias and then it will enter its outputs. humans now use AI in their daily lives, they will learn the biases, and that will, increase their, bias.
Yeah.
And then that cycle just keeps going. So that's why it's a snowball.
Wow.
So
I think we've already started that process in like society, which is super scary. I mean, if you've got 800 million people a week using ChatGPT, it's bound to have started.
Yeah. So we know that snowball is part of our human nature. So it's quite scary.
Okay, so given we know that snowball has started to form, that teases up to segment 4, which is how can we have a healthy relationship with AI and stop that snowball effect before it gets too big and wipes us all out.
So Kieren, you promised that you could get us out of this horrendous
I'm going to save us, everyone.
situation, because that previous segment's got me feeling a bit worried.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be easy, I don't think, but one good thing, which maybe because we've learned from history, like look at, well, I guess we're still very much battling with managing social media, but I think there's light at the end of the tunnel with that. I think people are really conscious of this brain rot thing. It does seem like there's a bit of a turning point, but at least this time, we've spoken in previous episodes about like the first wave of AI being like recommendation algorithms in social media, Gen AI coming in as the second big societal wave. We've got the lessons from the first time, and we've stopped, I would say, relatively early on in this current wave to think about how this is affecting us. So maybe we're early on in that snowball process, let's say. So there's maybe we can take some hope in that. So what is good is that it's not just us talking about this. That's a good start. So there are a lot of experts from academia and in industry who are like analysing this and looking at the effects. And they have begun to propose kind of guidelines for responsible and optimal use of Gen AI as well. So not just like don't use it. It's like how to use it to your advantage. Because I guess if we figure this out, right, if we really do learn to leverage the fact that, as I always like to say, we've got like a mini Einstein in our pocket nowadays. If we can really leverage that without it just replacing us, surely the benefits are immense. So I just want to quote here someone. So Dan Levy from Harvard University in the States, another very prestigious and probably the most in the world university, who is a senior lecturer in public policy, basically said that if a student uses AI to do work for them rather than do the work with them, there's not going to be much learning going on there at all. And no learning occurs unless the brain is actively engaged in making meaning and sense of what you're trying to learn and what the task is that you're actually trying to solve. And this is not going to occur if you just ask ChatGPT, give me the answer to the question that the instructor is asking me. So it's this idea of metacognition, I think, which you wanted to just touch on briefly, didn't you, Riku?
Yeah, so metacognition, it kind of sounds like a crazy terminology, but you can think of it as thinking about your thinking. So when we think about these brain rot states, you can think of it as you're very unintentional in how you're thinking. You're really just kind of letting your thumb find some dopamine. You're not really looking at the videos. And I think that what's increasingly important in this kind of AI generated content world, where it's creating it and curating it. So, making it and also showing you what you want. We need to be more intentional about what we want to look at and the skills we want to learn. And that's what metacognition is. It's kind of stepping outside of what you're currently thinking and thinking, well, what new set of skills do I want to learn? And then kind of tuning your activity around that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah. And you often hear this notion of metacognition come up a lot in meditation and like mindfulness, which I wasn't planning on chucking this in as a bit of guidance on how to use AI thoughtfully, but perhaps practicing some mindfulness externally to any like AI use could benefit you in your use of AI as well. So, more generally, just metacognition can benefit you in all sorts of ways where you're thinking about your own thinking and you don't just get caught up in your own specific thoughts, even if that's completely internal and nothing external on TikTok. And a lot of breath work and kind of mindfulness activities where you do just switch off any external stimulus and just learn to observe your own thoughts when they come and go. Perhaps that could be a bit of good advice on how to use AI as well as other things in your life. But anyway, sorry, that was not me trying to be a Buddhist monk on you there in this episode.
I feel so peaceful now.
More practically.
It's going to be okay.
I'm glad there's some... but yeah, more practically, what does this look like? Again, you've probably heard a lot of these things that we've said already. So making sure we really approach AI as a collaborator and this kind of co-pilot rather than this oracle or a replacement for your thinking. So staying engaged when you're using them and like really looking at what their reasoning is or the sources that they find, how are they drawing on the information that they're giving you? Because a lot of these tools actually cite the bits of text that they've got. So going and looking at those as well and make sure they match up to what the chatbot's saying, not just copy and pasting the final answer. And I think this other thing which we saw in some of these notes from Harvard was to iterate. So, if you are just kind of asking for the answer and going to it in one step, there's never going to be any learning going on there, and there's no kind of collaborative nature to that relationship. So making sure that you start by drafting something yourself to begin with and giving it a go on your own, then it's fine to maybe have the AI critique it or expand or give you a kind of new perspective that you might not have thought of. But then making sure that you like thoroughly analyze what it's done and what the changes are, and then how you feel about those, and making your final tweaks and editing the output. So again, using it as this like Socratic guide rather than an oracle. So like making sure you try and get it to prompt you rather than you just kind of getting everything out of it. So the practical guidance I just put down on a few like bullet points here. So always do the kind of brain first pass, even if it's just like a really quick 30-second thinking of like, how would I answer this before I like put it into ChatGPT, even if the answer is I don't know, or like this is my vague hunch. Then if you can, just write some bullet points down on what do you think, what would potentially change my mind on what I think. So like, unless there's really compelling evidence from the AI, you don't just take that as the answer. You stick with your guns on something, because we have a gut. The chatbot does not. And yeah, the last thing as well is just these tools can actually explain their reasoning now. And even though annoyingly a lot of them kind of hide it these days because they do a lot of these like reasoning steps, you can click and show thinking. So if the AI has taken multiple steps to get to the output, if it's in a high stakes situation, go and check and look at all those steps that it's taken to get to the answer that it's given you. Because it might not be super intuitive from the prompt how it's got there, but if you show the reasoning, it might give you more of an intuition and you might spot something that's gone wrong along the way. And yeah, lastly, just like be super critical always, especially in areas which I think teases up to the next point in a sec, that you're not an expert in yourself and you don't just have an inkling as to whether that seems right or seems wrong. So especially in areas where you don't know what the answer would be, you need to go and fact check that and see all the sources. So yeah, those are just some practical tips, which I'm sure a lot of you know already, but just to reiterate, I think we always, even myself, you do forget that and you get caught up in the ease of just having the answer given to you sometimes. So maybe just write down somewhere on a sticky note on your computer or something, like to remind yourself at all times when using chatbots to work that way.
I do really like what you said about using it to prompt you. I think that's like very Socratic, where you might ask Socrates for the answer, but he's just gonna hit you with a question.
Yeah.
I do like that, and I definitely think my own usage, just anecdotally, that definitely helps. So.
Yeah, loads of stuff nowadays. If I'm trying to learn or do anything, I always have it in the study mode. I find it's really good for that it just never gives you the answer. So,
one thing I think that's really hard just for the general public and everyone to navigate is just when to use AI and when to trust it, right? And we're not going to claim to know the answer here, but what has been widely identified is that this is just a very ambiguous thing.
Yeah.
And there's even something called Moravec's paradox, which is even older than this chatbot technology, which is about how a lot of the time computers are really good at tasks that humans are really bad at.
Yeah.
And actually, and they're really bad at things that humans are really good at. So just
that
as
we
an example,
take for granted as well.
Yeah, like, a calculator came out many decades ago and could add any crazy two numbers, but a human would struggle with that. But then human eyes are really good at detecting how far away something is in the picture or different objects, whereas even the best AI tools today get that horribly wrong. So,
A more recent example as well is, ChatGPT can go and write you like an incredible essay about string theory, but it can't count the number of R's in strawberry. Like
that's a perfect example.
Another Moravec's one, yeah. But there was a bit of research that actually went and looked at these chatbots to assess like their capabilities and found that it's actually this like really jagged edge of like one thing that they're really good at the kind of top of their capabilities, and then something else might not be so good, and then in another domain it might be better again. So it's this concept basically that just because it might be an expert in one thing and pass the bar exam, for example, does not mean that that intelligence scales to all other tasks in all other domains, and that its capabilities are actually like really jagged.
Right.
And it might be incredible at passing a law exam, but it might not actually be good in a law room at like an actual case, for example. That's another kind of more focused instance, that very specific tasks it might pass, and they will be the ones that it was trained on, like trained on these kind of textbook answers for law exams. It's obviously going to be better at that, but it's probably not sat through, well, actually maybe law's a bad example with like all the kind of transcripts that come out of courtrooms, but yeah, anything where there's been a lack of training data, it's probably not going to be as good as that. But basically, I think that the advice you can take from that is if you can just, even at the highest level, just have a bit of inclination as to what type of data these big chatbots were trained on, which, as we always go back to, which is a simplification of the training data, but we always say it's like 60% Reddit or something, which is probably not the case. But just educating yourself a little bit about where chatbots get their knowledge from helps you understand just intuitively what they may be better and worse at. So that's a bit of advice there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is we do need to always go back to like what was the training data, and that's not just the internet, but it's also the humans that were doing the evaluations and something called RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. And we do need to kind of broaden our AI literacy in general. So how does the GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer. Like, what is a transformer? And obviously not to self-plug artificially ever after, but we do truly believe that these concepts are accessible to a wider audience.
Yeah.
Even though they sound horribly mathematical, and a lot of time they are. Yeah. But conceptually, there's always a very human-grounded concept when it comes to how we build AI systems today.
Yeah.
A lot of AI researchers are inspired by how humans work, and that's where we want to demystify AI and show how they're built today, but based on humans, and how they're built affects their capabilities. So
exactly.
Self-plug
there.
Exactly. Yeah. In terms of knowing when to use it, when not to use it, I think just a broader AI literacy is the key to that.
Definitely. Yeah. Maybe another kind of example of that at a high level is, without necessarily knowing exactly what the maths is and what these models are doing down at the computer level, something like prompt engineering is a good example as to where, if you know enough about how they were trained, like Riku said with RLHF, you can know the right ways to ask them a question that will actually give you the most useful output, that is maybe actually practically useful rather than just useful in terms of satisfying you in terms of its response. And you can constrain them quite a lot and get them to behave and respond quite differently. So you can, even though it doesn't actually solve the problem of hallucinations, you can do things like don't be kind of overly flamboyant in your responses, like only stick to exactly what you know. And whilst it's more of a kind of art than a science, there have been lots of studies that show that it like dramatically increases performance on like tests, which is really scary. But just knowing a little bit about how to prompt these models can actually get more out of them, and hopefully mean that they respond more accurately and don't kind of persuade you to do crazy things and stuff. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, things like that. So yeah, if that sounds good to you, then subscribe and stay tuned, please.
It's very unromantic when you tell ChatGPT exactly how you want it to be, but it does get the job done. So and there's been loads of research on this. So cool. So I think to start wrapping up, maybe. So hopefully we really want to leave you with something more concrete, and we came up with kind of like a core workflow here, and I think we've touched on some of these points throughout this episode. So I think the first question is, what data would lead a human to say this, right? So when you see a output from ChatGPT, you need to think, well, if a human told me that, what would have, where did they learn this? Are they like a professor of, earth science? You got to think like, what information would get them to say
and what's
that?
The evidence? Perhaps that researcher has only ever studied like a single corner of the earth. Maybe they've only ever done their research in a specific country, and you probably wouldn't want to, even if they're the expert in their field, you might not ask them about something about the other side of the earth that they've never been to.
Exactly. Yeah. And also we have to remember that the world is always nuanced and grey, which is really annoying. And quite often the AI will have a more black or white output, and we have to remember, if the AI is giving you a strong answer, it's always good to try and hear the other side of it and force it to, contradict itself, and then you can actually convince yourself where the middle ground is.
And I think, as we've said before, like, these models never respond and say, I don't know, or like there isn't an answer to that. It will always try and give you something, back to that like RLHF thing. So if there is a grey area where there's no nice answer, it will probably find a way to give you one.
I don't know if any of you have any friends that are like people pleasers, but I know that I've had to like really try and force them to like tell me what they actually think. Where do you actually want to eat today? Like, don't think about where I want to eat. And I think that's how we need to interact with these things.
You're like that with eating as well.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go for dinner, Riku? He's like, I don't know, wherever you want to go.
I mean, I'll just eat anything. But but I do think that's how we need to have a relationship with AI, is almost be skeptical of it and believe that it is trying to please you, but it does know the answer, and try and weasel it out. There have been many studies showing that if you're naturally skeptical, you actually use the technology much better, because you have those interactions like, I don't think that's true, explain yourself. You have that back and forth. And
it will prompt the learning and like actual mental cognition on your part, because you're like checking everything and you still have to do work yourself.
Yeah. It's like, give yourself some anxiety.
Nice.
And the last thing that I think is really important is you need to write the summary. So I think even when you're writing an email and whatnot, if you can use the system to generate ideas, draft things and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, you do need to be the one writing the summary, because anything meaningful that you want to write about is not going to be easy to write. I think we need to embrace that.
Yeah.
And also embrace that you have a responsibility to the words that you own. So we shouldn't turn away from that responsibility.
Yeah.
I
really like those. It's really solid advice, and definitely something all of us can take into 2026 on these topics. If I can chuck in my tiny little bit of advice and take home point then as well. So none of these studies know the like really long-term effects of this Gen AI usage, but we're starting to see patterns emerge that show that there's probably a slight misalignment between people's expectations of what these tools can do and what the tools tell us they can do, and what reality is and what your brain's actually doing. So we don't know the output yet. We know there might be a misalignment there. So my advice going into 2026 would be, find out for yourself. Don't just assume you know what it's helping you at and where you're more productive, because as we know from that Meta study as well, people thought they were 20% more productive and they were 20% less productive. So track your time, look at tasks that you're already doing, find some way to actually look at your output, and maybe get someone else to assess what you've done and be like honest and critical, and then look at how you do when you're using AI. Maybe have an AI detox for a bit and see if you can still do those tasks and how your output compares then. Does it look how it used to look before AI? So, don't just use them blindly and assume it's all going to be good. Like, start to kind of think critically. Hopefully after you've heard this episode, you will think more critically that it might not all be as good as it sounds. And try and track that for yourself. So we must augment and not replace ourselves. So that is the key take-home message from me, I think. Cool. Well, there's a lot there that we covered, wasn't there? But hopefully there were some nuggets that can help you use AI to your benefit and to the best of your abilities in 2026. And going forward, being more prosperous and not have this horrible snowballing effect that you spoke about.
Oh gosh, and how not to use it. So I don't know if this episode, I feel like it might have been ending on a positive note there, but our next episode is going to be on, can AI help save the planet?
Wow, just a small task.
Yeah, I hope is positive, but then
we'll
again, the planet needs saving. That's kind of negative.
Yeah, well, humans aren't particularly doing it that great currently, so stay tuned to find out. But thank you so much for listening today. Please like and subscribe, and get in touch with us if you want us to do an episode on a certain topic, and subscribe to our Patreon if you want kind of extra episodes and bonus clips, behind the scenes bloopers, etc. But thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time.